What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we are back on to deck tech videos. We're going to be talking about a very cool new deck that I think could definitely challenge the meta in a post-Hiram world. It's in a better position than it ever has been. Losing out on card advantage has been tough, and there's still decks that generate card advantage like crazy. This deck isn't necessarily the most focused on card advantage, but what it lacks in card advantage, it more than makes up for in strong characters coming to the board early. So we're going to be talking about Ruby Steel Challengers, but before we do that, as always, a big shout out to the Patreons for making these giveaways on the channel possible. We're about 150 subscribers away from hitting 3,000 and another big giveaway, so if you aren't subscribed, now is a great time to do so. If you haven't checked out our last video where we hosted a draft featuring sets 1 through set 7, gave away an Enchanted and a promo Dragonfire, definitely check that out because that video was a lot of fun. That tournament was a lot of fun. I think it is something that could be a cool idea for other people in the Lorcana community to do with their local players. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Ruby Steel Challengers. So the first card in the 1-drop slot, and arguably the best 1-cost challenger in the game, is going to be Captain Hook Forceful Duelist, a 1-cost inkable 1/2 stat line questing for 1, but he does have Challenger +2, so when he's challenging, he is going to be a 3/2 character. Next up, and when you are going into those steel matches, definitely where you want to be on turn 1 is going to be 4 Mickey Mouse Food Fight Defender, a 1-cost inkable 1/2 stat line questing for 1 with resist +1. So steel is going to have an incredibly difficult time dealing with this character, even when they start putting characters out. Like, unless they get Smee to the board on turn 2 and they're focused more on things that are like singers, like Troubadour is going to deal nothing to him, Daisy Duck's going to deal nothing, Cinderella's going to be useless, Ariel's not going to be good. So maybe on turn 3, if they've got 3 characters out and they're able to sing that Strength of a Raging Fire, they take your Mickey Mouse out then, but is that really worth it for them? Next up in the 2-cost slot, to combat those opposing Smees, we have our own Mr. Smee Bumbling Maze, a 2-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 2 with at the end of your turn, if you don't have a captain character in play, he's going to take 1, but if you have a captain character in play, he is going to be getting away scot-free, and obviously we are playing those captain hooks to be able to try to keep him alive. And you may sense what's coming when you see this card. We are on 4 Mulan, Enemy of Entanglement, a 2-cost inkable 1/3 stat line questing for 1 with whenever you play an action, this character gets +2 strength this turn, which is definitely not an irrelevant ability. We have definitely some actions in this deck that we're looking to be playing on 3, like Brawl, so there is a real potential, depending on what your opponent's curve out is, that on turn 3 you Brawl, make your Mulan a 3/3, and then take out another threat on the board. So that's always an option. You do also have the option going into turn 4 to start singing some of those other actions. Our last character in the 2-cost slot, we're on 4 Calhoun Marine Sergeant, a 2-cost uninkable 3/2 stat line questing for 1, also with a resist +1. So this is your fantastic follow-up on turn 2 to those Mickeys when you are in those steel matchups, especially if you're in those Amethyst steel matchups, because they're very likely to go Fox, and being able to take out a Fox with a Calhoun, even if it is a trade, still feels pretty good. And they're going to have a hard time with any of their spells dealing with your Calhoun before then. Any of their actions, I should say. Still call them spells because of magic. Next up in the 3-cost slot, we have a little bit of a toolbox, starting off with Pete Games Referee, a 3-cost inkable 3/3 questing for 1 with when you play this character, your opponent can't play actions during their next turn, so it's going to shut off actions until it comes back around to you, which is always fantastic to be able to control that. Be able to shut off those Be Prepared for a turn if you need one more turn to win the game. He's not super contingent on going Pete to try to shut off all of their actions, because you do have some pretty strong characters that are going to not be too worried about your opponent actually playing their actions. But when it comes into those turns where you're looking at a potential of Be Prepared, Pete is definitely going to be something you'd like to be able to have in your hand. Next up in the 3-cost slot, we are on 2 Gustav the Giant, a card I think is actually really good in this deck, really super good in a steel meta, even good into those Ruby decks that are trying to Sapphire Coil you. We've been seeing a little bit less of that, but he's going to deal with a Maui, he's going to deal with any of those big opposing threats should they choose to challenge into him, and that is a 3-cost inkable 6/6 stat line, crazy stat line questing for 1, enters play exerted and doesn't ready at the start of your turn. So that's where they balance out that 6/6 for 3. However, during your turn, whenever you banish another character in a challenge, you are going to be able to ready him. So where that gets really interesting is when you go like turn 1 Mickey, turn 2 Calhoun, they give you something to potentially banish, which is entirely likely. You're usually going to be able to get 1 banishment out of your Calhoun, and then turn 3 you go Gustav the Giant, and then banish something, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there with a readied 6/6 character, and they're going, oh no, it's turn 4 of the game, there's a 6/6 in my way. Obviously, when you get a little bit later in the game, Gustav the Giant may not be as favorable, but in addition to being a 3-cost 6/6, he is inkable. The card I think is getting kind of overlooked in the meta right now, and is actually really cool into the steel heavy meta we're seeing develop, and that is going to be Dennehy, a 3-cost inkable, so when he's not good, you ink him. 3/2 stat line, doesn't quest for anything, so this character's not going to be gaining you any lore, but he is reckless, so also may not be the greatest. They may have a strong character that they force you to challenge into. So again, inkable, there's going to be situations where you want to ink him. However, he is resist +2. So in those steel matchups, you go turn 1 Mickey Mouse, turn 2 Calhoun, turn 3 this guy. That is also going to be very funny because they're going to be going, oh no, all the removal in my hand is essentially useless unless it's Strength of a Raging Fire with a million guys on the board, which is going to be super hard for them to develop, especially if they're trying to quest while you're sitting on a board with a Calhoun and a Dennehy on it. This character challenges into Aerial, Spectacular Singer, and takes no damage. Like, it's really, really good. Speaking of really, really good 3-drops, we are on 4 Sisu Emboldened Warrior, a 3-cost inkable 1/4 stat line questing for 2. However, she does have Surge of Power. This character gets +1 strength for each card in your opponent's hand. Like we mentioned, card advantage is hugely important in Lorcana, so your opponent is very likely going to be looking to generate some card advantage, and in doing so, they're just going to make your Sisu that much stronger. I know you can make an argument for playing Flynn Frenemy in the 2-cost slot with all of these big characters like Gustav the Giant and Sisu. However, Flynn Frenemy is really not favorable in a steel meta, so he is very likely to be useless in most games unless you're going against Ruby Sapphire, which is still very likely to be able to have the next card we're going to talk about, which is going to be Brawl, a 3-cost inkable action banish chosen character with 2 strength or less. Obviously a great way for them to deal with those Flynns, so pretty much every matchup you're going into is going to have a pretty good answer for Flynn in the meta right now, and it's going to make it really, really tough to get any value out of him. But Brawl, still really good. People have been moving away from that a little bit more since Hiram is not relevant anymore since the ban, but Brawl still has a lot of very relevant targets, especially with Steel Song on the rise. Next up in the 3-cost slot, we're on 2 Let the Storm Rage On, a 3-cost uninkable action song. Deal 2 damage to chosen character and draw a card. Obviously you have some great options to be able to sing this card with, and deal 2 damage to something and draw cards. So this is going to be a little bit of extra card draw. With the amount of uninkables in this deck, though, we couldn't lean into it harder than 2 copies. Next up, we are on 4 Strength of a Raging Fire, a 3-cost inkable action song. Deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of characters you have in play. So especially if you are on curve, you're going to be able to have 3 characters in play by that turn, and if you're playing into something like I mentioned, like Steel, they're probably going to have a really hard time removing some of the characters that you could potentially develop in those early turns, which is possibly going to put you in a very good position to be able to sing Strength of a Raging Fire going into turn 4 and dealing 4 or 5 damage potentially. Next up, jumping straight past the 4-cost slot, because really on 4 we want to be either shifting and developing another character or developing a couple low-cost characters. But going into turn 5, we do have some straight 5-drops like Maui Hero to All, a 5-cost inkable 6/5 stat line with Rush and Reckless. You know him, you love him, he's blasting out basically every enemy in the game that isn't evasive. Still a card that I think is very good. Next up, we are on 3 Captain Hook Thinking a Happy Thought, a 5-cost uninkable 2/5 stat line questing for 1, so kind of rough into those Brawl matchups in some instances. He isn't always the best thing to play, but what you really want to do with him in those matchups is shift him down and immediately use him to sing, because that's where he's really going to shine before he gets removed by something like a Brawl. But he does have Challenger +3, so he is going to be a 5/5 Challenger if you do shift him, if that is relevant, and characters with cost 3 or less can't challenge into him. So if you're shifting him on 3, your opponent's very likely to only have characters that cost 3 or less that are going to have the ability to challenge in, and they can't challenge Hook, so he just sits there uncontested by any of those characters. Next up in the 5-cost slot, and what this deck is largely built around, I'm not on 4 copies, you may notice. I think there's some instances where you're not necessarily going to want to have this card, but when you have a good, well-developed board, Mushu Majestic Dragon is fantastic as a 5-cost inkable 4/4 stat line. Gets around a lot of the removal, not all of it. He does quest for 1, and whenever one of your characters challenge, they gain resist +2 during that challenge. So obviously that's super good with things like Calhoun, who's already going to be netting you lore and already has resist built in. in. Even those small Mickeys, it makes him a 1/2 with resist 3, which is kind of funny. And during your turn, whenever one of your characters banishes another character in a challenge, you're going to gain 2 lore. So if you're banishing something with Calhoun, like I mentioned, you're going to have resist 3 in that situation, you are going to go ahead and gain 4 lore, 2 for Calhoun's ability and 2 for Mushu's ability. And even with those Denehis that are reckless, that gain you no lore, once they start banishing characters with this, with resist 4, they're probably not going to die with whatever they're challenging into, and they're going to be netting you 2 lore every time. This is what you want to be doing with that Captain Hook in that Ruby Sapphire matchup, is just getting them down and immediately singing Whole New World to disrupt whatever is in their hand and refill your hand to be more on par with them. It is a 5-cost uninkable action song. Both players discard their hands and draw 7 new cards. Obviously, it gives your opponent some cards. That's why we're only on 3 copies. But in some matchups, you got to do that to keep your foot on the gas. Next up, we have 3 Mulan Elite Archer, a 6-cost inkable 2/6 stat line, questing for 2, shifting for 5. And when you play this character, if you have used her shift to play her, she gets +3 strength this turn, so she becomes a 5/6. And during your turn, whenever this character deals damage to another character in a challenge, deal the same amount of damage to up to 2 other chosen characters. So you're going to be able to potentially get her down and just blast 3 characters right out of your way. Something that's really cool, particularly with playing the 2-cost Mulan shift target, is she does have that ability where she can get stronger for actions, and you do have actions that you can sing. So it's entirely possible that you may have another 3-cost character out, sing something like Strength of a Raging Fire with them, deal damage to something before shifting. Your Mulan that was a 1/3 becomes a 3/3, and that +2 is going to carry over to the shifted character during that turn. So if she shifts down as a 5/6, she is still getting that +2 and becoming a 7/6 in that instance, and she is going to deal 7 not only to the character that she's challenging into, but potentially to 2 other characters, and to remove almost any character in the game, with save for something like Tamatoa So Shiny. Any relevant character, I should say. Next up in the 7-cost slot, we got some more Mulans. We got 2 Mulan Imperial General. I think this card's really cool. It's a 7-cost inkable 5/6 stat line, so it's got the static stat line the other Mulan it kind of shifts into, essentially, and she is questing for 2 just like the other Mulan. She is shifting for 5 just like the other Mulan, and she is evasive, so she is going to deal with those evasive threats very handily and be super difficult for your opponent to deal with unless they have some type of direct removal, because being evasive, they're probably not going to have an evasive character that can challenge into her favorably. But whenever this character challenges another character, your other characters gain this character can challenge ready characters this turn, which is super relevant with the other shift in Mulan with those Calhouns. There's lots of instances where you have Calhoun down and your opponent is just going to try to hold their character back to not let you get favorable challenges. All of a sudden you shift something like this Mulan, take out that big character they were trying to force your Calhoun to challenge into, and all of a sudden your Calhoun and whatever other characters you have on the board can challenge ready characters and just absolutely disrupt what your opponent was trying to do. Great option to sing with that Mulan after the turn that she comes into play if you don't need to quest with her, is be prepared to just go ahead and clean up that field if you've lost some board control. This is also a great option to hardcast on 7. We are only on 2 of these because this deck doesn't always push to 7 ink. Sometimes you're looking specifically to shift to be able to sing this song, so can be a little bit of a difficult one to get down in some instances. In a lot of the instances you can control the board directly with your characters and not have to be prepared. This is kind of your panic button, but it's always good to have a couple copies in a Ruby deck. It's a 7-cost uninkable action song that's just going to let you straight up banish all characters. More of a one-sided B prep, and one of the cards that people have said is probably one of the biggest issues with Lorcana right now is Sisu Empowered Sibling. There is not really anything in the game that can stop it. We're hoping to see something in the next set that lets you look at your opponent's hand and force them to discard a character card. That would really be something that would prevent Sisu from getting the kind of value that she's been getting in the meta, where there's really just not any way to stop her from coming down, especially in those Ruby Sapphire matchups where they have plenty of ink to play an 8-cost uninkable, and they're really not getting punished for playing uninkables in those Sapphire decks because they have cards that let them ink uninkables. But that's neither here nor there. The final card in the deck is Sisu Empowered Sibling, a 8-cost uninkable 5/4 stat line, shifting for 6, was entirely doable with this deck, especially when you have those small Sisus to shift on top of. And when you play this character, banish all opposing characters with 2 strength or less. Obviously you're not doing anything to reduce your opponent's character strength, but any of those characters that are within the realm of what Sisu is going to do, which is kind of the strategy Sapphire is going for now too. Without Hiram, you're seeing less involvement of Sapphire Coil, but it's going to banish any of those 2 strength or less characters. And if you are shifting her, you're getting a quest for 3 immediately, which is always great to pull out that extra lore pip compared to your smaller Sisu. But that is the breakdown on the Ruby Steel Challengers deck. I think the deck is a lot of fun to play. I think it is fairly competitive into the meta. I think if you want to bring something different and kind of throw your opponent off, not let them immediately know what you're playing or expect what your moves are going to be, this is a fantastic option. I think it's a great way to throw off a heavily steel meta, especially. So if you're seeing a ton of Ruby Sapphire where you're playing, maybe not the deck that I would recommend, but if you're playing in a local meta where a lot of people are playing steel, this is a fantastic deck to bring to challenge those competitors. What do you guys think in the comments below? Are there other cards that you think I should have played, or cards in here that you think I'm crazy for playing at all? Let me know your thoughts. Remember to like and subscribe if you're feeling inclined. It helps us to get promoted to other people who may enjoy the videos that you're enjoying. And when you see those toys, video games, and awesome decks featuring the big elite archer Mulan off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.